Welcome to Off-Road Travel TV.
How to replace dirt bike handlebars. I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks how to make your life easier. The first thing we want to do is figure out what bar bend you need. So whether you're a taller rider or a shorter rider, or even depending on what discipline of motorcycle riding that you do, we're going to help you figure out which bar bend is right. There's three main things to consider when buying a handlebar. There's the width, there's the height, and there's a sweep, also known as pullback. One of the easier options to choose is the width of the handlebar. Thankfully, most of the bar manufacturers have given us ample room to be able to mount all of our controls, while also giving us cut lines to shorten our bar, depending on, say, your riding style or what conditions you ride in. For instance, people who live in the East Coast may like a narrower bar to be able to get in and out of those tight trees when riding woods. Or if you're a motocrosser, you may prefer a wider bar for being able to dig into the corners and navigate over the big jumps. Desert riders also like a wider bar because they're going high speeds and you need that wide stance to be able to make sure that, say, we don't end up in a bar swaps kind of situation. This dual sport bike is a perfect example of why width matters. You need to consider things such as the other things that you might mount on there, such as hand guards, a mirror, GPS devices, phone attachments, mapping switches. You're going to need a wider bar to be able to accommodate all of those things. When cutting your bars, you're going to want to use a hacksaw and a piece of tape to mark where you want to make your cuts on the bar. Make sure to mark both sides evenly. Use nice smooth cuts to get through the bar. Once you're through, you'll feel that there's a lot of rough edges and burrs that need to come off. So use a file or a Dremel tool to take off those edges. Really focus on the throttle side because you don't want any interference with the throttle tube and those burrs, as it could be pretty detrimental. Regardless of what style of riding you do, focusing on sweep is one of the most important parts of choosing a handlebar. The sweep is the amount of pullback that the bar has. A straighter bar is great for aggressive riders, motocrossers, woods racers. However, you may like a bar with more sweep as it takes the stress off of your shoulders and your wrists, but it still keeps your elbows up in a proper riding position. The last decision we need to make is the height of the bar. That's measured from the center point, from the mid of the bar to the center point at the end. Now that we have our bars, it's time to replace them. One of the first things that you'll want to do is pull your phone out of your pocket and take a photo so you can remember the layout of how everything went onto the bar. That'll be very helpful when buttoning everything back up. So the first thing we like to remove is the handlebar pad, and then after that we'll move on to the clutch perch as well as the brake perch and the other controls that are on the bar. When taking your photos, pay close attention to the routing of your cables and where there may be any tape or zip ties that have held things on, so when putting it back together, you do it the same way that it came off. Next thing we're going to do is take off the electronic switches on both sides of the handlebar. On this particular bike, we're going to need to remove the left side grip because the ignition switch needs to be slid off. On your bike, make sure that everything can come off before cutting off the grip because you might not need to do that. Now we're going to loosen the throttle housing, but we're not going to worry about taking it off because there's generally not enough throttle cable slack in order to slide it off. But we're just going to loosen it for now, and then we'll take it off once we loosen the 4 bolts on the handlebar clamp. Now we're going to reverse the process, starting with putting the throttle tube back on the right side of the bar and back into the light clamps. Now we're going to get the bar centered onto the handlebar clamp. Thankfully, almost all manufacturers have center lines to be able to make that process easier. And then we'll put on the top part of the handlebar clamp and we'll just lightly snug it up, not tightening it into position because we still need to get our placement right. Once you've got the handlebar clamp on top, you don't want to tighten it down too much, but now is a good time for you to be able to figure out if you want the positioning of the bar to be rolled forward or backwards. And that's just going to come from sitting on the bike and feeling where the most comfort comes from. Now we're going to continue to reverse the order and put all the rest of the pieces back on. Make sure not to tighten everything down fully, as we'll sit on the bike at the end and make sure that everything's in the proper placement, then we'll button it up. One of the tricks of the trade is to use a throttle side grip because the diameter is bigger. So we can slide the grip on in place. That way we can make sure just to get the alignment better with the grip and the ignition switch. Before we can make our final adjustments on lever positioning as well as the starter switch and the ignition switch, we need to get the throttle housing in place and tightened up. You want to push it as far in as you can against the bar, but then back it off just as little as you possibly can, maybe a millimeter or two. That way when the throttle turns, it won't interfere with the end of the bar sticking wide open. Next, we're going to get our levers in the right position. This normally requires you to sit on the bike, so that way you make sure that you put your arms in the proper riding position and give the levers a squeeze to make sure they're exactly where you want. It never hurts to stand up as well, because the positioning where it's sitting is going to be different from where we might like them to be standing. So it's critical to get the lever positioning correct, because you do not want the ball of the lever to exceed beyond the handlebar. So make sure that you get it to the edge, give it a couple of pulls and make sure you get it in place. You can start by tightening the front bolt, or in some cases it'll be the top bolt first. Snug it down and then give a good snug on the bottom bolt. Once we have the clutch level at the height that we like, then we're going to switch over to the front brake and make sure that we get it in the same placement as the clutch. The final item to finishing up our handlebars is getting the handlebar clamp tightened up. So we're going to start with the two top bolts to make sure that they have even pressure, and then we will move to the backside bolts, will act as our pinch bolts. There's been a lot of theories over the years on how to install these things. I've spent the last 20 years in the motorcycle industry, and I think I have the best way to install dirt bike grips. The first thing you want to do is make sure there's no oil or grease on the handlebars so you get a good grip adhesion. There's a lot of different variations of things that can be used in installing grips. What we found works best is a clear spray paint. Let me show you how we do it and how quick and easy it can be. First off, we spray a little bit of paint on the inside of the grip, and then we'll hit just a little bit on the outside of the bar, spraying away from the bar, the bike itself, and then we'll slip right on. Slide it on nice and steady, not too fast so you don't blow out the end of the grip, and as you see, it'll go right on. It'll dry pretty quickly, so you don't want to take too much time, but you still have plenty of time to be able, once you get it on there, to make sure that you get the grip in proper placement. On the throttle side, rather than remove the stock grip and leave behind the glue and the residue, I prefer to use an aftermarket throttle tube like this one made by Motion Pro. The easiest way to put on the throttle side grip is by first mounting the throttle tube into the throttle housing. Like a lot of people, I like to add safety wires, another layer of protection to keep the grip from slipping. I like to use this 32 thousandths brass safety wire for my installs. I like to use 3 different strands and double loop it. These are safety wire pliers, a great tool to have. When you pull the levers together, you then slide this piece down and that locks it into place. Once you have it locked into place, you can pull this little piece right here, will make it spin, tightening the safety wire. Now that the safety wire is nice and tight, we're going to cut off the tail and leave about a 1/4 inch. And the final piece is to push the excess safety wire into the grip. Make sure you bury it deep so it doesn't get snagged on your gloves while riding. You can do this by either pushing it sideways or back, but just make sure not to push it forwards, as it could come back up. Now that we've installed the bars and grips, the next time you go ride, come back in, make any minor adjustments, and you should be good to go.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. See you on the trail.